All right. We've got a big episode today. Gotta let the music play, though. Gotta let the music play. Yes, welcome to Justin and Donald Save America. As always, I am Donald Kendal, joined by Justin Haskins. So, like I always say, Justin and Donald Save America, this is the show where we uncover the hidden threats shaping our future. We expose the agendas behind them and arm you with the truth. Today, I want to talk about the construction of a massive surveillance state that is occurring right now. One firm claims that it could end crime as we know it. Is this actually feasible? What are we giving up as a trade-off to this possibility? Also, at the end of the episode, we have a new socialism segment where we're going to be asking whether or not Joe Rogan came out as a socialist recently. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Justin, how are you doing today, good sir?
I'm doing pretty well. It's been busy. My wife's out of town.
Ooh.
And so I'm watching Teddy, 3-year-old Teddy, who's basically like a human tornado. And it's not easy. It's not easy, ladies and gentlemen. Parenting is hard, and it's harder when you're alone.
That's true. That is true.
It's trying times right now. So
before we get into the show, let me just put that call out for everyone to support the show. You could do so very easily if you're listening to the audio of it. Just leave a review. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that like button, share this content, subscribe if you haven't already. Even leaving a comment under the video will help break through those big tech algorithms that prevent content like this from being shown to more people. So if you're a constant viewer of the show, you'll know that we talk about AI stuff all the time, emerging technology that is very squarely inside the realm of the emerging issues that we talk about. This is one that I've been kind of suggesting that we do an episode on for a little while now. The article that I have, it's basically about the construction of a surveillance state and what our takes on it should be, being kind of right of center. So this article that I have to kind of start off this conversation is titled, AI Startups Say It Will End Crime by Blanketing the Entire United States in Ever-Watching Spy Cameras. So this article talks specifically about a group called Flock Safety. It is valued at $7.5 billion, according to Forbes. And it has amassed a matrix of over 80,000 AI-powered cameras throughout the United States since its founding back in only 2017. So if you read through this article, it talks about, all the different jurisdictions, whether it's cities, whether it's private businesses, private communities, that have, set up shop with these places, covered their whole domain with these flock cameras as an effort to, crack down on crime and prevent retail theft, all sorts of different things. And like the title of the article suggests, the intention of this flock safety is to cover the entire United States with these cameras. And I, this idea that they're going to be able to end crime by doing this, I thought, is probably far-reaching of a goal. It's probably something that they're maybe biting off a little more than they can chew. But the concept itself, I think, is worth exploring. So that's why I wanted to talk to you about this, Justin. I have intentionally not had conversations with you about this idea because I want to have like a very natural conversation about this live while we're doing it here. But I guess the trade-off is, I'll frame it this way. I feel like right of center, you could see people saying like, yes, no criminal should be allowed to do crime. So we should have systems in place to stop those criminals, right? On the other side of it, also right of center, you'll find a lot of people talking about this being a surveillance state and that we're sacrificing our liberty and we're just, living under the spy cameras of whatever government agency is able to access this information. So that's kind of where I want to start off. I've got a whole bunch of other examples where we can get into some of the ways in which this surveillance state is being constructed currently, not by just this one firm, but by a whole bunch of other firms, and how this is all being bolstered massively by artificial intelligence. Some of the things that are being done today would not have been possible 5 years ago. But before I get into some of those more specifics, Justin, what's your initial take this issue here?
Well, let me answer your question with a question. And
I
that
will.
question, that question is, regardless of what you think of this, do you think that this will happen? Or do you think
Yes.
this is just like, okay, you do. Like within 10 years, 20 years, roughly, obviously, like something like that?
Sure. 10 years. I mean, it's already starting.
Oh, really? 5?
And I could walk you through some of the other things too to give you a better sense of why I think it's more imminent than just this, like, oh, in the year 2050 we'll be surrounded by cameras. But yeah, go
Right.
ahead.
I absolutely think it will happen. I think 5 years to 10 years is maybe a little short, but it will definitely happen. And it's inevitable. There are already cameras in a lot of places that are being used by law enforcement now in investigations. So, for example, traffic cameras are used in criminal investigations. So, like cameras that are trying to catch people running red lights and stop signs and stuff. They already use that when they're investigating other crimes, trying to track people. Ring cameras. This is really interesting. Especially when crimes are committed in neighborhoods where there's lots of people who have ring cameras around, for those who don't know, like a ring camera is a camera on your door. You can kind of see people who are knocking on your door, coming up to your doorstep, or other people have ring cameras outside their house just for surveillance or whatever. So these kinds of home security cameras, when there is a crime in a place where there are a lot of these cameras around, it's common for the police now to go ask the homeowners for permission to see if there's anything on the tapes. This is already happening. And in fact, if I remember right, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, I think this happened because the guy who was right now allegedly killed Charlie Kirk ran off into a neighborhood. And they were trying to figure out who he was, and they were going around trying to get access to ring cameras to figure that out. And so in a way, it's like, and then think about this. You have cars, right? You have all these cars like Teslas and other kinds of cars. Mm-hmm. They've got cameras all over them. It's just a matter of time before those things get accessed as well. They don't record video typically, but that will happen. And so the idea that you have cameras everywhere already that are being used, it's just not comprehensive enough where you really can catch all criminals. I think we're not even talking about whether this is something that could happen. It is happening. It's just, will it happen? Will it be expanded to the point where it really is like a surveillance state? And I would say absolutely, because it's such a hard thing to argue against. It's not unconstitutional because you're allowed to photograph people in public. You're allowed to video things in public. This is all happening in people's, in public spaces. It's really hard to argue against in that sense. And then it is always difficult, as people who support gun rights know, it's always difficult to be on the side of the argument where the counter is, we could save lives. Mm-hmm. We could save lives if we just did this thing. We could save lives. We could stop criminals. We could prevent harm to children. And you're over there saying, yeah, but what about my privacy? And it's like, well, what's more important, your privacy or protecting kids? And like those kinds of arguments are really, really difficult. And so I think it will happen somewhat gradually. By modern standards, it'll be pretty fast, but by modern standards, it'll be graduate. It's been graduate. It started with like traffic cameras, and now it's like ring cameras on people's houses. And then it will be, there's just a little bit more cameras. and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then it will get to the point where it's like they're just everywhere. And everyone just knows that when you go out in public, there are cameras everywhere, and everything you do is being recorded by someone.
Mhm.
And it will probably reduce crime by a lot.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
just won't have any privacy.
yeah.
That's fine.
So looking at this, I've been scrolling through this flock safety website, and they have the measuring flocks impact, trusted by 5,000 plus law enforcement agencies in 49 states. They talk about one county here, Cobb County in Georgia, how there was a reduction in robbery in just 1 year by 52%. 100% homicide case clearance in 2023 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Year over year reduction in overall crime in 2024 in Delano, California was 56%. So they've got like a lot of these points that they can make that, again, if you're worried about crime in your area, these things are, they're powerful messages. And so this is just one thing. So this is the idea of blanketing the United States with these cameras, but there's some other there's other things out there too. So this is one that's called Clearview AI. So Clearview AI specializes in facial recognition software. So these are cameras that are outfitted with AI that allow people to identify somebody just based on their face, right? There's actually been a lot of like lawsuit stuff regarding this, and that it's infringing on certain things, including taking pictures of like children and stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes with this, but this is another one of these things that are offered. But then along with the license plate readers that you mentioned, along with the Ring cameras, I mean, I watched some of those like police investigation videos on YouTube, and there is oftentimes they'll bring up Ring camera footage as like the little piece of evidence that was able to like piece this trail of whatever together. But then also there's a thing called Shot Spotter. So these are cameras or sensors that are placed in cities that can basically tell where a gunshot came from. They're able to triangulate where the noise came from based on like the 3 sensors in a region, and triangulate where like the shot came from. So all of these different things all offer a ton of information, a ton of data. And some of the things that you were describing, Justin, even what I just said about the Ring cameras, that's all kind of like the old style. Like, well, we'll just go and see what this camera, shows or whatever. But now we're getting to a period of time where artificial intelligence is able to do a lot more of the heavy lifting, it's especially important in an environment where there's a ton of data, where like manpower can't like feasibly comb through all of the data. Because not only is there all of this, but there's like GPS stuff from your phone, GPS stuff from your car. There is all sorts of cookies when you're going on websites. There's so much data out there. But there is a firm that's hoping to make some, I don't know, evidence out of all of that noise. And that is a company called Palantir. So this is, again, I said this on a previous episode, but Palantir is something that we have to look into even more, because there is a lot of interesting stories surrounding Palantir. We brought them up in a previous episode having to do with like national security or foreign policy, and the automated drones, that sort of stuff. But they also do a lot of work when it comes to like domestic surveillance, that sort of thing. So what Palantir does is able to take data from all of these different places and basically make sense of it. So much so that the Trump administration has actually tapped on Palantir to compile data on Americans to kind of help their work when it comes to like, immigration, customs enforcement, or some other things. But this is the world that we are very quickly moving into, where the surveillance state that was dreamed up of in that old like Will Smith movie, Enemy of the States, it's quaint compared to what is possible now. So, when this startup says that it's going to be able to end crime by blanketing the entire United States in spy cameras, that's only one facet. And that's only one firm. And all of these places are moving in that direction. And this new technology is facilitating it. So, yeah, when you ask whether or not it's going to be able to be actually materialized in the next 10 years, yes, I absolutely do think so, especially in light of terrible things that happen that like kind of push this forward, that people want for this sort of thing, in the light of an assassination or some terrorist attack, or in regards to there was another story that I saw about how ICE wants to use the Clearview facial recognition software to help investigate like the protesters that are assaulting ICE agents. So
Right.
all of these things kind of have these natural like pushes like built into it, just based on things that happen in our daily life. And I just wonder, like the people that are listening to this, I'd love to hear your feedback, because I don't think Justin or I are necessarily taking a hard stance one way or the other. What are your feelings about this? Is this something that you actually like? I want every criminal that commits any crime to be stopped, or is that threat of the complete eradication of privacy when you're like out in public, is that kind of cause you to hesitate when it comes to ideas like this?
It's going to happen. We've already said that. We both believe that. The thing that's really scary about it from my perspective is just the fact that no one on the right today really trusts the government with this kind of technology. And yet it's going to happen. And so you just have to, it seems inevitable that this will happen, and then that some administration in the future will abuse it. Like, for sure. It's just, there's no question about it. Like, it will absolutely happen. A president or a governor or some city government, like, think about that. It doesn't even require like an abuse of a Congress or the president or something. It's just the mayor of Chicago decides that he wants to crack down on some, group of people that's giving him a hard time. And he's using this as a way to, help spy on them or try to catch them doing something they're not supposed to be doing or whatever. And it just seems inevitable. And the other thing too is like, it is interesting that this does not, and this has already been established. As I said, we have cameras everywhere, right? And cameras in public, it's been decided that that's totally fine. For traffic cameras, for example, it's totally fine to have traffic cameras, right? But what's really dangerous about that, and that's what people said back when traffic cameras first came out, like a lot of people are like, oh, this is, the beginning of the end of our, freedom, right? And people kind of laughed and whatever, but now here we are, and it was, I think, true in a lot of ways. I have a hard time understanding how this is not an unreasonable search and seizure. It's like, there's a constitutional protection against the government searching you, but they're allowed to film you and endlessly, like everywhere you go, and that's not a problem. I feel like that is a really, I understand there's been lots of court cases about stuff like that. There's no problem with watching people in public. But there's a difference, I think, in a lot of ways, to a police officer watching someone in public who he thinks might be up to something, and like cameras everywhere all the time, watching everything that you're doing constantly, no matter where you go. It just seems like, how is that not a violation of your privacy? How is that not searching like what you're doing like without a warrant, because they're not getting warrants for these things, obviously. And so it just seems to me like it does seem like it crosses over into a violation of your personal rights, even though I don't think courts will agree and they will allow it anyway. And B, it seems inevitable that this will be abused and that this is going to be a massive problem 10 years from now, maybe 20 years from now. I don't know. It doesn't really matter when. It will happen for sure. And I don't know how you avoid it, because again, are you going to be the guy that stands up and says, no, I want my, give me my liberty. I don't care about the kids that we'll save from this, and the, the women who got raped and their victim, their perpetrators would have been caught. I don't care. I want my privacy. Like, no one's going to say that.
Right.
It's just going to be so hard. It's going to be too hard to fight against it.
Yeah, well, your point about some future administration, or even some just governor or whatever, mayor using this or abusing this, I think is something that, like, we definitely have to keep in mind. I mean, we're not that far removed from the COVID years where they were using every lever of government to crack down on people having birthday parties with more than 4 people, and not socially distancing themselves the proper 6 feet, or any number of things. So imagine that crackdown, that level of crackdown, with this sort of power behind it. You're going to find every single person that's wakeboarding by themselves out in the middle of the ocean, so you can throw them in jail for not doing, what they need to stop themselves from getting COVID or whatever. And then, like, some things that you and I have talked about before, where it's, like the infeasibility of being able to do like real crackdown on, taking assault rifles off of streets or something. This technology makes big government crackdowns definitely much more feasible. Maybe not in that specific case of firearms, but give me a minute and I could brainstorm a few examples of how the government could use this to, do things that they wouldn't have been able to do in the past. So
Right.
It's a very interesting thing. I don't think that this conversation is like, we're not having this public discourse nearly as much as we probably should be, because nobody heard about flock safety a year ago. Yeah, and they've already got 80,000 cameras and 5,000 places or whatever it is.
It's so bad. It is, and again, like we've talked about when we've done shows on AI and stuff like that, but it's not just about AI. It's about all kinds of these fast moving emerging technologies. This is a radical change.
Right.
Like, this is a huge change. The idea that government could see everything you do all the time in public, everywhere you go, that's a big deal. That's not some small little thing. And yet, is that what people are talking about today? No, we're too busy talking about Jimmy Kimmel and whether he's, it's a good thing that he got his show back. And now the right has to protest Jimmy Kimmel for getting his show back after the left was protesting because he lost his show. And it's just like, meanwhile, the government is building, these vast spy camera networks on everybody, and everywhere you go, you'll have no privacy. Oh, no. We're Jimmy Kimmel, who ranks 100 and whatever 50th in the ratings. That's the most essential story in America. I mean, we are not prioritizing.
Well, let me just say too, I mentioned the Clearview, I mentioned Palantir, I've mentioned this flock safety, I mentioned some of these other things. For every one thing that I'm mentioning, there's probably a dozen more that I'm neglecting to talk about.
Yeah,
but there was actually one thing. I think I've sent you some stuff on this, Justin, just privately. But Sam Altman, he's the head of OpenAI, biggest AI company out there right now. One of the big projects that he's investing in is a thing called WorldCoin. That's kind of like a cryptocurrency sort of thing, but it's also, people are talking about it as it's like the infrastructure for like a universal basic income sort of program. But the thing that you have to do to register for this WorldCoin thing is you have to look into this orb. This sounds like science fiction, but it's absolutely true. And it scans your iris and retinal patterns or whatever, because that's the most unique identifier for a person. And it creates a world ID for you. So like there is so what we're talking about on this is just barely scratching the surface in terms of the surveillance state that's being built. And you know, when you read some of the literature from some of these like futurists, Yuval Harari is one that I've read a lot about. They talk about how basically the end game of all of this stuff is to track every modicum of data possible, because that all feeds into these algorithms and the AI and allows them to have a clear picture of reality so that they can predict stuff in the future, all of this sort of thing. So yeah, this is definitely something that is actively occurring, and you should expect it. I encourage people to have these conversations more and more, because yeah, this needs to be part of the public discourse.
It's vital.
Absolutely.
It is totally vital. Yeah.
Oh, but any last words on this, Justin? Should we get to our stopping socialism segment?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So this story is brought to us by Justin. This is an ad for a
Slow
movie.
horses, everybody. You're welcome, America.
Yeah, so for our stopping socialism segment, we are talking about Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is probably the most influential person in media of probably the last 10 years. I don't think that's an overstatement.
No.
You know, his podcast with JD Vance and Donald Trump essentially broke the internet right before the 2024 election. He has like played a large role in the kind of the cultural shift in terms of the kind of alternative media, and just, you know, this kind of rightward swing when it comes to kind of, I don't know, culturally speaking. But this article comes from Newsweek and it is titled, Joe Rogan says he's not a Republican. Quote, you're gonna need some socialism. So, Justin, you sent this to me because one of your hypotheses about kind of the alternative support for Donald Trump was that it wasn't necessarily some, you know, like all of a sudden we're all conservatives now. This is actually just more of a movement about populism than anything. And one thing about populism is that it's not necessarily, you know, a right-wing thing or a left-wing thing. It kind of changes based on the stuff that's going on. So when Joe Rogan comes out and says, well, you're going to need some socialism, I think that got your antenna up a little bit. And that's, you know, what, you know, is the cultural shift going to go back towards Bernie Bros, where Joe Rogan kind of started off? And so yeah, why don't you take us through this a little bit?
Yeah. So essentially, Rogan had a guest on the show, and the guest very explicitly, a podcaster named Jordan Jensen, and Jensen very explicitly said to Rogan, you know, weren't you a Bernie bro, or, you know, aren't you a socialist? And Rogan's response is essentially, yes, I am. But then he goes on to say that he's not really a Republican, and that it's, he liked Trump for these other reasons, and that really you need to have some socialism in society, and that socialism is a good idea, but, you know, it's got some flaws to it, but we do need some socialism. And so, yeah, I kind of am a socialist. This is essentially what he's saying. And the argument that what's really interesting about this whole thing, and we'll read some of the quotes to you in a second, but what's really interesting about it is there is this sense that on the right, that look, Trump won the popular vote. He won the Midwest. He did really well. Republicans are winning over all these moderate people, and that you know, the wind is at the backs of the conservative movement, and this is kind of the general sense that a lot of people have. But when you actually start looking at polling data, like we did in the last episode of the show, of younger people 18 to 39, and you see, you look at the polling data for various groups. You look at some of the things that a lot of these sort of moderate figures like Joe Rogan, kind of independent-minded people are saying, you realize they're not real. The reason that they like Donald Trump is because he's anti-establishment, and because they don't like the establishment and they don't trust institutions, and they think, and to some degree they think the left has gone way too crazy on social issues.
Right.
Like, these are the two themes that you hear all the time. The left is too crazy on social issues, and I don't want to be associated with all of that stuff. And sometimes you hear them say, like, Joe Biden was basically brain dead when he was in the White House, and they lied to us about that. But it's really mainly an anti-institutional thing. And we don't trust the institutions. We don't trust elites. And we need somebody who the elites hate, is essentially what they're saying. And Donald Trump checks all those boxes off. He's not a hardcore left-wing person on social issues. He definitely doesn't like the elites, and the elites don't like him. They try to put him in prison, and so he checks off all those boxes. But so do a lot of the socialists. So, like, Bernie Sanders checks off those boxes too. The elites don't like Bernie Sanders. He is like far left wing on social issues, but he doesn't really talk about it all that much. He focuses on the economic issues is the main thing that he talks about. The $20 or whatever the heck it is now, $25, $50, I don't know, minimum wage, whatever he's preaching now. The single payer healthcare thing, right? Like, this is the kind of stuff that he focuses and emphasizes. And that is what attracted Joe Rogan to Bernie Sanders in the past, when Joe Rogan was a big Bernie Sanders supporter. And a lot of people, I think, thought when Joe Rogan became a Trump guy, that was Joe Rogan becoming more conservative. And there's all these other Americans like him becoming more conservative. And it wasn't. And Joe Rogan makes this really clear in this episode of his show. And again, we'll show you some of the quotes in a minute. But it's like, what he's saying is not, oh, I became a conservative. That did not happen. He still believes in a lot of left-wing ideas. He supported Trump for other reasons that were not related to, like, the traditional ideological issues like government spending and, I do think he cares about individual liberty, but like various, government spending. We don't want too many big government social safety net programs because that's kind of an infringement on our rights. We don't want to eliminate, private health insurance, for example, like all these traditional issues. I don't think Joe Rogan changed his mind on any of that.
Sure.
I just think he was willing to put all that aside because he wanted an anti-establishment guy. And he wanted a guy who was going to fight the elites, and he wanted someone who wasn't a crazy person on social issues. And
right.
I think that many Americans are in that same boat. I think
like even like Bill Maher, you can't get like much more left than Bill Maher, right? Yeah. And like he was like, all right, left, like you're going way too far when it comes to this, cancel culture and crackdown on comedy and some of these social things and the trans ideology stuff, and so that, but like, is Bill Maher suddenly conservative? No, like not at all. But I will say, just scrolling through this website, like if one thing would turn me sympathetic to socialism, it's all of these damn pop-up ads that's all over the place. This is terrible. Can socialism do something about this?
I know.
Jokes, people. That's just a joke. All right, let me read some of these quotes though. And I will say, Justin, you sent me this article saying, hey, we should talk about this. I read the headline. You called me later. You're like, hey, did you see what I sent you? I said, yeah, well, just based on the headline. I mean, is he just talking about like fire departments? So I will pat myself on the back because he does specifically reference fire departments here. But just to give you a sense of it. So like Justin said, the guest asked Joe Rogan whether or not, aren't you still a Bernie bro, or weren't you a Bernie bro? And Joe Rogan says, I am. Look, I think the idea of socialism is wonderful if everyone can get their S together. And everybody was disciplined, Rogan said. But it's not the case. And I think that the human nature, unfortunately, you're going to need some socialism, though, right? you're going to need the fire department. He continued, like, this is one of those things that I point to all the time. People say, oh, socialism doesn't work. The fire department is an entirely socialist idea. Like, we all pay into it and they take care of everyone's fire, right? You can't only you can't have only the rich people have a fire department and the poor people get their effing house burned down all the time. That's crazy, right? We all agree to that. So, Joe Rogan definitely stopped short of saying, well, we should socialize the healthcare industry. We should socialize the energy industry. We should, the government should seize the means of production, which is like the real socialism. And basically just points to the fire department. This is something that we hear all the time, Justin. I mean, you mentioned earlier that your favorite example is like, well, we have snowplows, so there you go. We're already a socialized country, So I don't know if you want to address that, but my thought was like, this is kind of how the socialist rhetoric starts. You never have people being like openly advocating, other than the Democratic Socialists of America, advocating for like that other side of the spectrum, like the starting point. Yeah, the government should be in control of like producing shoes and everything else that we buy. They start off with this like, well, you're not against fire departments, right? So we just want to take this little slider on the spectrum and just move it this way, from the fire departments, but we want to go a little bit more. And so when I hear Joe Rogan saying this, it's a little discouraging. But what's your response to the whole, fire department? That means we're
so the fire department thing is stupid, and I hate that argument. I understand it. It's a decent argument if you're arguing against anarcho-capitalism or something, or like, you're arguing against the position that we should have no such thing as government anywhere. But
sure.
Literally 99.99% of people are not taking that position. And the idea that if you have any government service, that means that you're basically a socialist, just a light socialist, is a completely ridiculous argument to make. Because I could just as easily say, in the most hardcore communist society, if someone somewhere in that society sells to someone else based on a market, then that means that they're capitalists? Like, that's not how we use these terms. We don't call someone a socialist just because they believe that there should be a government service that, provides some sort of basic property protection, like police and protection for people too, like police, for example, or fire departments. When we were talking about this on the phone, I mentioned courts. I mean, courts are government services. So does that mean that if I believe there should be courts that adjudicate, various disputes between private citizens, or when people break the criminal code, that makes me a socialist? Like, obviously that's absurd. No, every single founding father of this country believe that there should be government services of some kind. So, like, again, so the military, does that make me a socialist? Well, it's a government program, right? Like, oh, it's a government. Like, these are stupid arguments that don't make any sense. But I think he goes further than that, as people often do who use the fire department argument. They start with that, just like Bernie Sanders, who is like a self-avowed, radical socialist, even will go immediately to $20 minimum wage as his thing.
Yeah, I mean,
as if that's what he believes and nothing else.
Yeah, it says right here, Joe Rogan said the same perspective should be extended towards other parts of society, be it education or healthcare.
That's right. And he also says, are we a effing community or are we not? And if we are a community, you have to take care of the downtrodden, and you have to do it because it's bad for them. And it's also bad for you, meaning that there are downtrodden people. We're all in this together. So you have to have a social safety net. I believe in all of that. And then he says later on, but I also believe you can't just give people free money, because then they rely on it and they become dependent on it. And then it takes away their ambition. They don't do anything. That's true too. That doesn't mean you're not compassionate. So he doesn't like either of these parties. I don't think there's a solution that's correct. I think you have overcorrection after overcorrection, blah, 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 blah. So you need to have some kind of socialism. He also very explicitly said that in reaction to him being asked flat out, are you a Bernie bro? He started his quote with, I am. Look,
Right.
I think the idea of socialism. So he does believe in socialist policies. I wouldn't say he's as far to the left as like AOC or Bernie or something like that. He's not. But is he a socialist? He says he's a socialist. He says he's a Bernie bro. Why would I assume he's not? Like, he clearly is. And you can be a free speech absolutist, which he is basically, and you can support individual personal rights and stuff and still believe that we should socialize a bunch of things. So I think that's where Joe Rogan falls on the spectrum. Yeah. I think he does think we should support individual liberty in a lot of ways, but I also I believe, based on what he's saying, that we should socialize a lot of stuff. Now, the real reason why this is so important is because of what it indicates could be coming down the road. Because when Trump leaves and is not the running for president next time, the challenge is going to be for whoever the next person is, and for the Republican Party in general, and for conservatives in general, to figure out a way to appeal to the Joe Rogan types of the world who actually are leaning socialist on a lot of things, but are also in line with us on free speech and stuff like that, and not run the risk of him drifting off to Bernie Sanders land or whoever the Bernie candidate is, because he actually prefers the socialist policies. And now that Trump is gone, he doesn't really trust whoever the next person is to be as anti-establishment as Trump was. And the longer term issue with all of this is, are we, even in cases where the conservatives are winning politically, are we actually losing in the long run? Because ultimately, conservatives are just, the big tent coalition is actually just becoming more and more to the left, and we're not even really realizing it, because if the Joe Rogans of the world are now on the right, but he's basically a socialist on healthcare, what does that mean for us in the long run? What does that coalition look like? And then to go back to the polling, for those who didn't see the last episode we did a couple weeks ago on polling, check that out. We talk about this 18 to 39-year-old poll that Donnie and I wrote for Rasmussen Reports in the Heartland Institute that shows that a huge chunk of young people, over 50%, say they want a socialist president in 2028. Not that they would vote for it, but that they want it. And that includes a large proportion of people who are self-identified Republicans and conservatives. And 35% of the people who said they voted for Trump in the poll in 2024 said that they wanted a socialist president in 2028. Well, that's exactly the Joe Rogan situation. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So this is a real problem. Like, the idea that the right is conservative and the conservative ideas are winning people over, and that's why we're winning more elections and all that. No, I don't think that's true at all. I don't think it's conservative policies that's winning people over. I don't even think we talk about conservative policies most of the time in the media on the right. It's the free, it's at least not the economic ones. I think there are individual liberty things that are persuasive, and those are conservative policies. And I think it's the anti-establishmentism of the Trump movement, coupled with the we're not crazy people on social issues. All of that together is the coalition. Right. And if the Republicans wake up one day and say, we should go with someone who's like a little more mainstream, we don't want a Trump type guy in there next time, why would Joe Rogan vote for that guy?
Sure.
Why would he vote for Nikki Haley? Like
Right.
he's not. He probably would rather vote for Bernie Sanders. So that's a huge problem, and I don't think the right is taking it seriously at all. At all.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this specter of socialism is definitely kind of rearing again. It after Bernie Sanders kind of got swatted down by the liberal establishment for the second time back in 2020. It kind of faded away. Like there wasn't a whole lot going on the socialism scene, but it does feel like there's a bit of a resurgence. I mean, we've talked about Zoran Mamdani a few times already. There's a few other stories out there. And just the proof that this article exists, talking about Joe Rogan and just the words Joe Rogan and socialism being in a headline together, I think is further evidence that this is an issue, and that's why we're talking about it, and we're going to be continuing to talk about it. I will say that I don't think it's necessarily fatal. I'm probably more of an optimist between the two of us on this show. When Joe Rogan even specifically mentions education and healthcare, I would love to explore that. I would love to see him talk more about that, because I don't think that he's necessarily saying that the healthcare system should be socialized, that we should have universal healthcare. It's very possible that he's still just talking about these social safety nets and these downtrodden people that need help when it comes to, getting healthcare and that sort of thing. But I think that this conversation is going to be one that's going to be had a lot more in the lead ups to the midterms and the next general election. But Justin, we're already north of 45 minutes here. Any last words? Anything you want to get off your chest? Any jokes, anecdotes, fun stories?
No. I'll try to think of one next time. I probably won't, but I'll try.
Okay, great. All right. Well, then, I do want to say to all those that are tuning in, thank you for choosing to spend some time with us here on the Justin and Donald Save America show. Join us every week for a new episode where we're talking about these emerging issues, whether it's artificial intelligence in the surveillance state or socialism at large. We'll be talking about it. Like I said, if you're listening to the audio version, leave a review for us. That would be greatly appreciated. If you're tuning into YouTube, subscribing, sharing this content, liking it, and leaving a comment all help break through those big tech algorithms to prevent content like this from being shown to more people. Justin Haskins, where can the fine people go to stay up to date with what you've got going on?
Go to @JustinTHaskins on X and go to justinhaskins.com. And also check out my YouTube channel, which you can search by just searching my name, Justin Haskins. You'll find it there.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you all for tuning in. We will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.